You want to stand? All right. I was just He said it. I'm following directions. Thank you. That doesn't last much. Good evening. Sorry for the goofiness. Good evening and welcome to the September meeting of the Granville Accepted Village School District Board of Education. Would you please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. Welcome. Thanks for being here this evening. Would you please take the floor?
Mr. Schmitz?
Here.
Mr. Miller?
Here.
Dr. Foreman? Here. Ms. Dietz? Here. Mr. Wolf?
Here. Accommodations, please.
Okay, good evening. I have the honor of recognizing two teachers, but one is here, who were honored at the Granville School Staff Convocation on August 15th. Meg Holler, GMS science teacher, received the Transcendia Excellence in Education Award, and Granville Education Foundation presented the Jody Van Tine Award to GMS social studies teacher Josh Grishaw. So the Jody Van Tine Award was established in recognizing distinguished and significant educational contributions by educators in Granville schools. This award is given annually by the GEF to commemorate the high ideals and characterize the life and career of the late Jody Van Tine, who was a second grade teacher at GES. Josh was chosen for this award due to his many contributions to our school community. He is both honest and direct with students, helping them to be and do their best as they work on experimental projects. His sense of commitment is legendary. He has been the coach of the Science Olympiad since 2014, and his commitment to education is tremendous and goes way beyond normal expectations. Josh is not here tonight, but you recognize him anyway. Meg is here. And Meg was chosen for the Transcendia Excellence in Education Award for so many reasons. She truly loves being in school, taking classes and learning new programs, strategies, and methods to help benefit her students. She believes in students gaining knowledge through inquiry, problem solving, and discovery. A variety of instructional and assessment methods are used to maximize student engagement with her, the teacher, and with other students. She has volunteered to be trained in PBL and piloted PBL before other staff members. She teaches both 7th grade advanced science and 8th grade regular science at GMS. And what is unique about Meg is she was a social studies teacher for many years, but trained in the sciences very early, and so she's making a mid-career switch. Is mid-career okay? So congratulations to Meg. We are very proud of you. So thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. 1, 2, 3.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm going to put Josh's award in the inner office bin. All right, so now it's my pleasure to introduce our student report, Tori Bergstrom, who is our senior body president, student body president. So, Tori, the podium is yours.
So, hi, my name is Tori Bergstrom, and I, like Mr. Rohn said, I'm the student body president of Granville High School. And I'd like to thank the school board for allowing me to come today to give an overview of just everything that's happening at GHS. So currently the fall sports are in session and are sweeping the fields, courts, and courses. So far the football team is undefeated, and the marching band is working hard at halftime with this year's show, Earth, Wind, and Funk. Golf just had their LCL last week, so they will be moving on to sectionals and invitationals. Girls tennis is also close to wrapping up, with their sectionals coming up in 3 weeks. Soccer is competing frequently and working hard. Cross country has also been doing well with many wins so far and a long way to go, with a competitive meet this weekend at Centerville, racing against top teams from Ohio as well as Kentucky and Indiana. Field hockey and volleyball are working hard to fill last year's shoes, and volleyball recently beat Newark Catholic in a competitive game. The fall play has also been cast. This November, the drama department will be performing Get Smart based on the TV show from the 60s. And it's a comedy and it is hilarious. Due to the final football game on that Friday, on the first Friday of November, the shows will be November 2nd and 3rd, so that Saturday night and Sunday night. So I encourage you all to come if we're free. So students are acing their tests. The classes are getting into the usual grind, but students are staying excited due to homecoming coming up on September 28th. This year at the homecoming football game, there will be a fall sports preview before the game, where all the fall sports will be honored rather than just only football, and alumni and more parents are encouraged to come to that. The pep rally will exhibit little red wagons instead of a float, and each class will have their own little wagon that they can decorate. So that's going to be really fun. And soon the senior class will elect the homecoming court and crown the homecoming queen and king. The themes for each class's Little Red Wagon and for Spirit Week surround fun holidays such as Valentine's Day, St. Patrick's Day, Halloween, and 4th of July. So Granville High School is starting off strong, and the Blue Aces are uniting to start a great year. Thank you.
Thank you.
So next I'd like to invite Mark Bobo from OSBA, who is here to give a membership presentation to the board. And yes, I told Tori ahead of time that she can exit, and Meg can as well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I wish my report was as exciting as tonight.
Yeah.
It's a hard act to follow.
Chance.
Thank you all for allowing me to be here tonight. Again, my name is Mark Bobo, and I serve as the membership and consultant for the Ohio School Board Association. We're honored to serve as your association for the last 58 years, and you've entrusted us with your board leadership needs. Serving in board leadership at this level is both an honor and a responsibility, and this responsibility is on the shoulders of men and women across America. And this responsibility is exemplified by the leaders in this room, and as you all serve in this community, we just want to thank you for your dedication and leadership. Thank you for everything that you do. The world is changing and the needs of our students are changing, so therefore the needs of our board members are changing as well. And as we continue to be a relevant resource to those that govern our public schools, OSBA is making a concerted effort to align our decisions and our work and our resources to meet the needs of our board members so they can continue to serve our wonderful children in the schools. I would like to draw your attention just to a few things in that pamphlet that I brought for you tonight, particularly our visa plan, which is the Visionary Initiative for Strategic Action. It's designed to ensure that as our world and as our students and our board member needs change, that we're in a position to educate, challenge, and support the work that you do. Board members need relevant and timely information so that they can make important decisions regarding district policy, identifying and hiring leadership, strategic and visionary work, community relations, and most important, student achievement. I would like you to focus on the inside of it, the four main pillars are governance, public relations, student achievement, and best practices. There's a lot of information in here. I'm not going to belabor the point, but I do welcome you to review this plan to understand some of the decisions that OSBA is making for our future and what the next 5 years will look like for OSBA. And I sincerely ask that in your review of it, if you have any questions or concerns, please reach out to me. So we want to make sure that what we're doing is aligning to the needs that you have as board members. We want to make sure that we're making the right choices and we want to have. So I welcome you to peruse that. I don't know, maybe during the morning coffee on a Saturday morning, and let me know your thoughts. As always, we believe that the value of our programming and services and the advocacy and information make OSBA membership a valuable investment. We do thank you for your confidence in us, and we will always be here to support your efforts. As you're aware, we do provide numerous board development opportunities. I just want to remind you, of course, in November, specifically November 10th through the 12th, each of you are welcome to Capitol Conference that is held at the Greater Columbia Convention Center. As always, we feel like this is the best conference in the world. We want to make it that much better. So I welcome each of you to attend. And this year we have some exciting speakers coming, but also on our website you'll see all that information. So I
welcome each of you to that. Very quickly, on the legislative front, I just kind of wanted to give some information. We have been, as you all know, the biannual budget was passed, but two particular things, the wellness funds. As you all know, Governor DeWine dedicated $675 million for student wellness and wraparound services. We're just saying, please use due diligence in how the funds are going to be used this year, as there has been discussions in the General Assembly about placing limits on how those funds are going to be used in coming years. So we're at there, but Governor DeWine has said boldly that this first year is totally up to the district how those funds are going to be used. Just ask you to use wisdom as people are already looking at how those dollars will be used. So, and also the Cut Patterson School funding formula. It is a prioritized item for the General Assembly, as stated by Speaker Householder. There is confidence that they will have a compromise agreed on in this General Assembly. We've been holding our breath for a little bit now, but we're hopeful that the Speaker has made it a prioritized item and that we'll get to some resolution prayerfully in the near future. The legislative team is always working to advocate on your behalf and ensure that your voice is being heard by the state representatives. So please get in contact with Jennifer J. or Will. They're always ready and willing to help out in any way that they can. And lastly, also in your pamphlet was a call for nominations, a document. I just want to highlight one particular committee, which is the OSBA Ambassadors for Public Education. This might be news to some of us, but public education doesn't always get a good narrative in our communities. And OSBA is wanting to lead the charge to help shape a positive narrative about the great work not only happening in Granville, but public education across our state. And what we're looking to do is to ask board members to serve as ambassadors for public education. We're really looking to engage those board members who are not presently serving on any of our other committees. This is an opportunity for you to present in your local community, whether it be at the church or community event or things of that nature, a ready-made presentation that's all of 5 minutes that just highlights some of the great things that are happening in public education. And we're actively recruiting right now. And I would say this personally, this is my committee, and my goal is to get this committee to be robust. So I'm sincerely asking give consideration to serve on this committee. Again, the time commitment is very small, and things are already ready made and prepared for you. So if you have any interest in that, I'll left my card on each of those documents there. Please get in contact with me, and I'll be happy to work with you again to make it a most robust committee. Again, OSBA, thanks you for your support and your leadership here in the Granville Executive School Village. And if there's anything that I can do to be of support to you, please let me know. I'm ready to answer that call. So thank you all for allowing me to be with you tonight.
Thank you. We appreciate all of those what it does. Look forward to seeing you and your colleagues at the Capitol Conference.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
Financials.
You have the August financial report in your packet. On page 2, just a high-level summary of August of this year in the gray column compared to prior years for the month of August. Revenue is up compared to last year, primarily due to the timing of the property tax settlement and the advance payments in the months that fell in. But overall consistent with our forecast. On the expenditure side, we're up about 2% from last year at this time. And the main driver there is salary and benefits and the steps and base increase that we gave. Looking over to page 3, this is the revenue detail. This is for year-to-date, so July and August. Property tax, as I said, we received a settlement, so that comes twice a year. And the split is usually about 47-53, it's not an exact 50-50 split. So to have received 47.4% at this time of the year compared to our forecast is right on point there. Public utility personal property comes at the same time as the real estate settlement, and that is usually more 50-50 split. So at 49.7, we're right on par there. The only other item to note here is the restricted grants and aids. So you see that that's only 3% collected compared to the forecasted amount. So if you'll recall from the funding formula being held flat, we're not receiving the additional career tech funds that we had originally forecasted. So that will be adjusted in the revision in November.
Why are we not getting?
So the funding formula is holding us flat, so instead of receiving the initial funds based on an increase in our career tech numbers from bringing that in-house, we're just gonna receive what we received last year.
Still some kind of funding formula, by the way. I talked with the director of budget management at ODE, Aaron Roush, and they tried to work on that issue in the final hours of the budget conversations, just recognizing that that was a pathway that many people had utilized and planned for. It didn't get done, but it's still on their radar to try and address in the mid-biennium. But it, unfortunately, we planned on it and we got held flat.
So how much, you planned for 132,000?
Yeah, and it'll be probably 40,000.
Is that the timing by which the formula could potentially be done or not until the full biennial revision?
I don't think that, well, we're all hopeful. But I don't hold my breath on that, and I believe that a compromise can be made by mid-year, but I don't know that any changes will occur until the next budget cycle.
And just an item to note with the wellness dollars that were mentioned, that if the Department of Education and the Auditor of State agree to include those funds in the forecast, it would show up under restricted grants and aid. So that line could go up if those funds are included in the forecast, but they've already said that it's going to be in a separate fund, so it's not going to be part of general fund. Part of that is for tracking purposes, but it's still up for debate there. OASBO actually took a survey today on whether treasurers would like to see it included or not, so we're hoping to get guidance soon so that we can solidify the forecast.
What would your perspective be? Would you like to see it included or not?
I would include it. One of the main reasons is that you can use those funds to pay for existing expenses, and so if you're a district that's choosing to spend that money on something that's already in the forecast, you're gonna suddenly pull that out of the forecast and notice a dip in your expenditures, which if you explain it in the notes makes sense, but if you just look at that forecast on its own, it's gonna look kind of odd. And I think that this was kind of advertised as part of the new funding formula, which is typically all general fund kind of revenue that you put into the forecast. So to keep it separated, I think would just be inconsistent in reporting and transparency.
But I would recommend it, we talked a little bit about this, I would recommend it being included for the 2 years of the budget cycle, and then in the last 3 years of the 5-year forecast removed. Because it is not something that, potentially will endure beyond that time. Yeah. And I'm going to share a little bit more during board discussion around mental health. There's a website that ODE crafted and created with guidance, and we met and talked a little bit about that last week, just talking about what opportunities there are. They're really pushing the notion of partnerships, like with, a variety of the groups that we've already met with, lab, mental health and recovery, Lincoln Memorial. Any of those could be partners. The ESC could be a partner. But I think most people are looking at this as how can we create something that's above what we currently are offering, but do it in a way that might be sustainable long-term. And there are some ways to do that I want to just share with you.
Flipping over to page 4, this is the general fund expenditure detail. Again, this is year-to-date, so it's including July and August. We are 2/12 of the way through the year, so to be around 16% expenditure of the forecasted amount would be on target. So salary and benefits are hovering right around there. Purchase service is a little above that, primarily due to some things that pay out not evenly throughout the whole year. So like we pay our liability insurance in July, so that's a big chunk that is up front. And then other objects is at 41%, but a large portion of that is our property and income tax collection fees fall there. So those fall with the same timing as the collection of those revenue sources.
What else is going to be in there, like, in that 380? And the other object?
Audit fees, bank charges, like memberships for professional organizations. Any other questions? Flipping over to page 5, this is just a visual representation for you of August year to date compared to prior years. So it shows that our revenue is gradually increasing while our expenditures are remaining fairly constant. And then on page 6, I included a current enrollment report. So this in the past has been especially important for revenue because we were on the formula. So every additional student generated additional funding. But like we said, being flat funded, it's important to make sure we have accurate information, but we're not receiving significant dollars for any changes in enrollment. So from 2019 to 2020, we increased by 43 students. And what we had forecasted was actually a little bit higher than that even, so but we were within 0.3% compared to what we had in the spring forecast. So for those additional 43 students, we'll receive an additional $58 per student in supplemental state funding. So that's the wellness component, yeah. And our growth factor. So
We won't spend it all on that.
right.
Brittany, you said that's the wellness and?
So it's the wellness, and then there's a supplemental component due to increased enrollment. So we, during the look-back period, had a 0.6% increase in enrollment. So we received $20 additional per student growth.
And that really was a byproduct of the advocacy around Licking Heights, Olentangy, those that are rapidly growing school districts. At the very end of the budget cycle, there was some type of calculation trying to address their funding needs, because obviously if they're held constant, they're adding hundreds of students, and that has a significant impact on their five-year forecast.
So we kind of always have bubble years come through and things like that. Where do we stand from a student-teacher ratio or from a staffing perspective relative to the way that the enrollment is settled out for this year? What's your
So we were very intentional. We added a second grade position, and luckily those students came in. So the good news is we guessed right. We were watching sixth grade, and we decided to reallocate that position to the elementary enrichment program because those numbers were on the border, and we knew that that would be a one-year kind of issue because once they go into seventh grade, we have the staffing to absorb the additional students. So we didn't want to place that position there for a one-year potential resolution. So really, if you look at the three positions that we added the CTE position that we didn't get funded for. We did a program position, and then we did an enrollment position.
Yeah, it's just always tough chasing those bubbles around and things like
Yes.
that and so forth. And I think, if we had to have higher class sizes for 1 year in sixth grade, because that's where that bubble is, it's probably better than trying to put somebody in and jerk them out and shuffle things around. So that's probably right.
Whenever we look at enrollment, we try and make sure that we do any internal moves that we can prior to going out and getting another FTE or hiring someone else. We try and do the internal moving to keep our ratios lower if there's the possibility. But when you're adding 43 students, you're going to have to add staff somewhere.
Yep. Okay, thanks.
So So then flipping over to page 7, this is an updated version of our capital budget to actual. So from last month's report to now, we paid out almost $500,000 of what we had encumbered in summer projects that we actually got bills and money went out the door. So our remaining balance is still about the same from where we were last month, but our actual expenditures have gone up, and there's just a few outstanding encumbrances still waiting on bills to flow through. And then the final page is just the cash reconciliation that we include for audit purposes. Any other questions, comments? Financial report?
We've got some things around the athletic project, I think, on the agenda. We'll talk about those relative to how they're talking about the capital budget.
Yeah, so that will impact what this would look like next month. We'll talk about that, yep.
Thank you.
Okay, that's great. Next, I'd like to invite Mr. Burnett up to talk about the local report card and the quality profile. As you are aware, the local report card was released September 12th. And we also released our quality profile in a very similar timeframe so that we can broaden the definition of success to people who kind of look at us and what we produce as far as a quality educational product. So Mr. Burnett.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. We're going to actually start with our quality profile this year when we go over this. The quality profile has 7 different sections. There are over 80 districts in the state that put out a quality profile, and it's really an answer to maybe all the things that a state report card can never measure. Our quality profile has 7 sections. The bottom 6 are really consistent throughout the state, and we've added one that's unique to us where we highlight some of the project-based learning activities that students do in each of our buildings each year, just because that's something that we value and something that we spend a lot of time and resources on in the district. And honestly, if you read through those, they're kind of, like, you get through like, wow, that's really impressive what our students did, and really just a small snapshot of what goes on across the entire district. So one of the things that we're going to be doing moving forward is tying our quality profile into our Portrait of a Graduate, because those two things do feed off of each other. So what I did is took a few things from our Portrait of a Graduate. So you've seen this a lot lately, and we did a presentation on it not too long ago, and kind of took some highlights from the quality profile and put them into these different areas. So I'm not going to read all this to you, but I'll kind of summarize some of the things that took place. So from a collaboration perspective, this one was actually the toughest one to narrow down because there were lots of examples of collaboration. And some of these, when I read them, you're like, well, that could have gone in this section and this section. Well, I think that's the beauty of the Portrait of a Graduate, is there is some overlap between them. But a couple that I wanted to highlight at the high school level, we actually have some students that are waiting to see if their paper is actually accepted to be published in the Journal of Herpetology Review, which for, I guess, the second time since 1943, there was a mink that was actually videotaped eating a bullfrog, an American bullfrog. So the second time and the first since 1943 where that's been documented. So I guess we got some crazy stuff going on in the land lab out there. That's not the important piece. That was kind of found by accident. They were just reviewing their trail cameras and looking. They were actually surveying wildlife populations. And one of the kids said, mink is, first of all, I didn't know we had mink out there. Could be a revenue opportunity. I'm sorry. But this bullfrog, and so they said, well, they started doing more research, and it was only the second time. So they actually collaborated with the Denison University professor, and their acceptance is pending in that particular review. That's pretty impressive for some high school students to get published in a professional journal. And if you've ever seen the writings in those, it's not what I would call typical high school writing. So that's been an interesting process for them. Another piece of collaboration, and this is at the elementary school, the students collaborated to create motor paths. So if you walk through the elementary school, inside and out, there's these little paths that are taped and painted in different places. And when students need a break, they can walk out in the classroom and they jump and they hop and they skip and they go through these motor paths. It kind of resets them and gets them refocused and goes back to class. It's a movement break is really what it is. But they created some outside, so the students worked with the staff. I know Mrs. Parsley at the elementary school is very key in that. They have it at the intermediate school as well. From a resiliency perspective, I think early literacy is something that is maybe the most important thing that we do in schools. You know, we have 100% of students that have met our third grade guarantee over all the years that we've done this for promotion to fourth grade. But embedded within that is a ton of extra work by our staff and our students to make sure students reach that benchmark. Because every year that benchmark gets a little bit higher, a little bit higher, and a little bit higher. And yet we still continue to see growth in that with our students and less students not meeting it the first time. So I think that's a perfect example, not only students, but also staff being resilient and working extremely hard over time to have those results. I think resiliency is also exemplified in our extracurricular offerings that we have for students. Athletics, clubs, we have a wonderful offering of those things at the high school. And sometimes, you know, we can't teach in the high school, we can teach in the school day after the school day. And I'm a firm believer in the power of those clubs and athletic events and musical events and so forth, that students learn a lot of resiliency because there's a lot of failure in those and a lot of learning how to bounce back from that failure. From an adaptability perspective, we have students going all over the world. We have a trip to Japan planned for this next school year. And I think you'll hear about some other planned trips, if not in this board meeting, in the future. That adaptability, and I saw this firsthand when I took students to China longer ago than I want to admit right now. When we first started the Global Scholars Program, you learn to be adaptable in a country that you don't know where you're going, you don't speak the language, you have to adapt pretty quickly. And that's such a foundational experience that I've had in my own life, and I know it was that much more powerful for the students. When I still see those students or talk to them or talk to their parents, they still reference that trip. That was 7 or 8 years ago. And I think that's an important part of the learning process. Empathy, we know how important we feel that is. Every group chose that as their number one part of the portrait of a graduate, the number one, what's the other one?
Competency.
Thank you, John. Competency that they wanted to see in that portrait of a graduate. I think the land lab with the building of the deck, that was students being empathetic to wanting to open the land lab to everyone. And that's what started that collaboration. So you could definitely put that under collaboration. But that initial viewing platform conversation was built on empathy. The Global Scholars Diploma, students that go through that, one of their competencies is recognizing perspectives. That's what empathy is all about. So the students get a lot of interaction with other students and other cultures that they can hopefully grow in terms of what it means to understand and be empathetic. From a responsibility perspective, the fourth grade last year, the ELA and social studies classes created kindness projects. So they made a lot of stationery, note cards, and so forth for local senior citizens. But they also took 200 of these laminated hearts and put them around downtown, and people could pull off these hearts and give them to somebody as an act of kindness. I thought that was kind of a neat little thing to write down. And then the Granville Kiwanis supported the creation of the bee apiary and the chicken coop. And so from a responsibility to the environment perspective, that was really what, especially the beehives that we have out at the intermediate school, that was really the driving force behind that. And then honestly, if you look at most of the PBL projects, they all involve critical thinking, but it's embedded throughout the equality profile. The one I would like to highlight is the fifth grade GIS math and science. I saw this one actually really up close as they were going through it. The fifth graders had to pick a different aspect of a mission to Mars, and they had to develop solutions for issues that might be associated with traveling through space or once they landed on Mars during that time. So I'll never forget, I was in Mrs. Weaver's class, and this little gentleman was so proud of his coding. He had coded a little spaceship to fly and then land on a certain spot that was all done through code. And he had taught himself how to code as part of this process. So he had coded a little spaceship, and it was a very Atari-looking spaceship, I would say. I'm dating myself, I know. And it went across the screen, but then it landed right on the spot, and he had coded all that movement on there. He was so proud of of that process because he had taught himself to code and taught himself to do something on a computer. And then the other cool part of this is the middle school, they actually grew plants for this Growing Beyond the Earth project that would survive the trip to Mars. And then the intermediate school students taste tested the plants for the middle school students. So it's kind of a cool cross-building collaboration as well. A very small sample. I think that's much more powerful than a report card can ever show, but we are going to go through the report card too. So very quickly, the report card, none of this has changed from last year. This is year 4 now for AIR. And same testing areas, same 6 components. We do get an overall grade this year. Our overall grade is A. There were 31 out of the 608 districts in the state that got an A. So kind of give you a frame of reference and how hard it is to get to that particular level. This is our overall report card. We'll kind of go through each section really to show you how they got these numbers here, because those are kind of ambiguous and maybe hard to discern sometimes how we got to those particular numbers. But you can see our overall rating is 4.606. That is the exact same rating that we had last year, and 4.125 to 5 is an A, and so we're solidly within the A range for this. So for the achievement component, we're going to start with that. This is where they look at our district indicators met and our performance index. So our performance index is how do your students perform on tests? And there were 3,393 tests given to our students, grades 3 through high school. Math, English, and science. Social studies at the high school level is not included in this, nor is biology at the high school level for a variety of reasons. We had 7 that were untested. Most of those were related to medical issues with students. It was not due to students saying, I'm not taking a test. That ship has sailed, so to speak, for us. But if you look at this, almost 80% of our students are scoring accelerated advanced or advanced plus, which means advanced plus as a student is scoring advanced and they're accelerated a grade ahead, like in math or language arts or science. I'm going to point out the one red X on here again is because of 7th grade math. We talk about this every year. We skip literally 70% of our kids past 7th grade math, so most of our students, a majority of our students do not take 7th grade math. That N size is very, very small. And they still almost met the indicator. But that's going to be something that's historical for us because we choose to do what's best for students, not chase test scores and try and make sure that we have more kids. You can see that on that math test, only 96 kids took the math test. Where in 8th grade, you have over 180 plus. There's a whole bunch of Algebra 1 students in the 8th grade as well. So that's why that red X is there, and that's been that way ever since we've accelerated past 7th grade. The achievement component score then, our PI of 107.3 is 0.3 points better than last year, so we are improving. We had met 23 out of 24 indicators. There were only 21 tests, but you also include the gifted indicator. We actually, one of the indicators is your chronic absenteeism rate, which dropped about 3% this year, which is a good, kids are coming to school more, which is never a bad thing. And so that's the 23 out of 24 indicators that we have in that particular line.
Is that performance index number the same as it has been for more than 3 years or whatever? That's a component that carried over from previous, or is it not necessarily?
I mean, in terms of how it was calculated,
Yeah.
it's a one-year calculation.
Is it the same?
It's the same calculation.
Is it the same base number? or-
So no, there has been several changes to the performance index measure over time, where some of the numbers were higher at different
So
points.
it's not really comparable to more than just.
Yeah, so I think the best way that we look at that is where do we rank in the state with our performance index. So if you go back 6 or 7 years, we were like 39th, 40th in the state. We're 13th this year. We were 13th last year as well. So there's been a steady increase in that. That's really the only way. You're going back to like Park and even the test
I just don't know how to,
before.
like, when tours change and tests change and things like that, it's just hard to get your mind around it. That's a number that I was trying to calibrate on. So that's great.
Thomas, to that point, I think this will actually shed some light. These numbers down here at the bottom, these aren't random numbers. So there's 608 districts in the state. There are 7 different high school tests. High school is kind of the end of their experience at in Granville schools. It's kind of the body of work that we've done with students. These are our ranks in ELA 1, ELA 2, Algebra 1, Geometry, US History, Government, and Biology in the state out of 608 districts. So, I mean, you add those up, I'm not even sure if we get to 50, combined on that. That's very impressive. We're not always that high in other areas, but I think as you go through, you see that improvement of our students over time. I think that's pretty impressive in terms of looking at the high school and where we rank from a percent passing. The nice thing about that, the advantage for our students is they have to take these state assessments. We know that. But when it comes to graduation time and graduation points and all these requirements for graduation, that's one less thing they have to worry about. And I think that is a stress reliever for students. Our students don't think about it in a place where you would have students that maybe weren't performing as well. I can imagine that would be very stressful for the staff and for the students to be worried about graduation. Are you going to get a diploma? And the students that we struggle with are really the students that move in because they have to make up all these tests. If they were in Ohio, that's really the tough part for us. So there's just some other data on there, but our performance was very similar to last year, if not just slightly better than it was the previous year. The K-3 literacy component, we actually don't get a grade for this one because less than 5% of our kindergartners are off track, and that's been historical for us. This number of 38% getting from off track to on track is about average what we've experienced over time. And we had 22 third graders last year that entered third grade off track. We had 8 of them that were on track by the end of the year, and all 14 of them met the third grade guarantee. Not one of those students didn't make it to 4th grade. So I think that's the real important thing that you take away from this K-3 literacy data. That's been pretty historical. We've been right around 35 to 45%. The third grade guarantee, I kind of just mentioned that. All the students made it to 3rd grade. This just tells you that out of the 191 students, 180 of them actually passed the 3rd grade test. 8 of them met it through some other test, so that's probably math testing that they met it through. The state allows for that. And then 3 students had an IEP exemption that moved them into 4th grade. That right there is the highest number we've ever had, 95%, even though that's the highest bar we've had to cross to on that particular test. Graduation rate, 98.2%, and this is 2 years ago. This is the class of 17 and 18. This is not the class of 2019. It's always a year behind. But our graduation rate, obviously, very high. And 3 of the 4 students that didn't graduate in that cohort went to Project Search. So that's where they spent a year working at LMH and other places around the county for special education. So graduation rate solid. The 1 student that didn't graduate actually doesn't go to our school, but it's in our cohort, and they stayed in Ohio, so they still count for us. So hopefully they'll finish up this particular year. Okay, gap closing. This looks at the performance of subgroups. So subgroups are any group in Ohio that has at least 20 in a particular group. So we have more subgroups now, because this used to be a bar of 30 students. Now it's down to 20. Next year will be 15. So all these highlighted areas, our subgroups are all students, Asian or Pacific Islander, Hispanic, multiracial, white, economically disadvantaged, English learner, and students with disabilities. And you can see what the goal is for each of these, and the fact that these are yellow means we met every single one of those. In fact, for every single one of these, we've already met the long-term goal that they have for 3 to 5 years down the road in this particular metric from an English language arts perspective. So for every subgroup that meets it, you get 100 points. Since we were 8 for 8, we get 800 points or 100% there. Same thing with math. Again, we've already met the long-term goals in every single one of those areas as well. So that's a good place to be, where you've already met your long-term goal that's 3 to 5 years. Now, that doesn't mean we stop and just rest on our laurels for the next couple of years. We're going to continue to try to raise those scores even more, but at the same time, it also thinks we're pointing in the right direction.
And that takes all the different tests that would be a part of math, for example, and language arts.
This is math and reading only.
Math and reading.
Doesn't
What
include
level?
grades 4 through 10
Okay.
from a gap closing perspective. And then the graduation is simply high school. That's all they're looking at there. You notice the subgroups are much less because at the high school we don't have 15 to 20 students in these particular subgroups, so we only have 3 there. So this is a pretty easy calculation. When you're 100% in all 3, it's 100 plus 100 plus 100 divided by 3, which is 100. Nice,
I can do that.
nice calculation to have. The one area that we got a B in was be prepared for success. That's been historical for us. Again, had they not raised the percentage to 93%, you say what our percentage was this year, we were 92.8. So we were just a couple points away from having an A in that. There were only 11 districts in the state that earned an A in this. We were 13th overall, so we were right on the cusp of getting that A. The ACT average for the class of 2019 was a 25. And that's the 8th highest percentage of remediation-free scores on the ACT and SAT in the state of Ohio. So our students perform very well on standardized tests. We can talk about how important that is, but it is important for college admissions. And that's still a reality that our students have to deal with. And until that changes, this becomes still an important piece that we are extremely cognizant of. So the Prepare for Success data, that's actually the class of 2017 and 2018 as well. That's always a year behind. So next year will be 18 and 19 when we get our report card. But basically it measures how many students were remediation free, how many got honors diplomas, and then if they scored a 3 or better on an AP test, you get bonus points for those. So we had 395 out of 426 students. So that's how they come up with that particular percentage.
And just the area that is 0 for industry recognized credentials, CTEC is working on that. There are some of the pathways that they have there that our students participate, that there isn't necessarily an industry credential that they can earn, or that they're not eligible to take. So they're aware of that issue. They're trying to figure out what they can do to help us have credentials attached to our students that are going.
Dr. Mulaney's been on committees at
Yes.
the state level to try and actually better, like, credentials that students can actually earn.
Correct.
You know, so it's a state level issue as much as it is that
Yes.
our students aren't earning.
Yeah. If our students had the ability to take,
Right.
I'm confident that they would do very well.
Yeah.
I don't want to belabor this one too much. I mean, 0.2 of a point away from an A. This will fluctuate up and down as you go through the different courses. But one of the things that's really tough about this is you have to take certain coursework that's maybe not required to get the honors diploma, for example. Well, if you have a student that has 3 social studies credits and really is passionate about math and science, are you going to look at that student and say, you know what, we don't want you to take 2 upper-level science courses your senior year, and that's what you're going to major in. We really want you to take this 4th social studies class because we need that honors diploma. And that's just not a conversation we're willing to have at the high. If it doesn't matter to the students, then maybe, yeah, take the social studies class if it doesn't matter. But when you're passionate about something, you know, that's not something that I think our counselors are going to force upon a student to take a particular course just to get to this point. So that may cost us a few points, so be it.
And I'll go on the record even further that I don't think they've captured anything really that tells you that you're prepared for success. So I think they have missed the mark on that component significantly. But then again, I'm just one voice, but I have a lot of voices.
What would you have them measure?
Oh, I think there's a lot of things in our portrait of a graduate that also show a straighter line as far as success metrics. I think you look at student survey data around hope, that's actually a higher threshold of an indicator of where your success. So there's a lot of things beyond just a standardized assessment that are more qualitative than quantitative that could show a better through line as far as indicators of success.
I do like the ECT and SAT remediation free because I like numbers. But that also shows that there's statistical evidence that shows that students are more likely to be successful in those freshman year college courses. And it's not all about college, but the reality is that's where 90 to 95% of every one of our classes goes.
Right.
So, I think that is important, and we want them, if they're successful that freshman year, they're more likely to finish college. And that's an important piece that we're going to be diving more into as.
Well, and Gallup's research suggests that if you experience one long-term project in your high school career, you have a higher likelihood of success in completing a 4-year degree.
Yeah.
So again, that's why project-based learning was promoted as an instructional strategy that we believe is important for our students to experience.
Is there a way for us to capture that in the quality profile?
I think that's why we started to shift that notion of articulating what students are doing from a process perspective more than a product. To me, a lot of that is product oriented, and I think what we try and promote for students is the process of learning for life.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, metrics around the PBL and how successful we are, as well as the portrait, right, are things that will kind of help us over time, make sure that we're holding to those.
The next measure on the report card is progress. Progress is divvied out in overall progress of students, gifted students, students in the lowest 20% of achievement in the state, and students with disabilities. And you can see our growth is an A, which means they all experienced above expected growth in totality. Then it breaks down further by subject level. The dark green is well above expected growth. The lighter green is kind of above expected growth. The yellow is expected growth. And the orange, the red is below expected growth. And this is pretty normal in district. You're going to see a different mix of colors. Overall, our students, on average, if you take all the tests combined, their index score was over 19. That means they scored 19 standard deviations above expected on an average test. I mean, that's unbelievable, and that's 11th best in the state. Last year we were like 8th best in the state. And that number, that list at the top of there, it shifts back and forth. So to be up there 2 years in a row like that, our students with disabilities actually had the 3rd best composite index in the state. They were number 1 last year, so I guess they dropped 2 spots. Overall, we were 11th best, and gifted was 26th best. Our students are scoring well above what the state expects them to on these particular tests. So they have to take them, at least they're doing really well, and they're prepared for them as well.
Well, and I just want to reiterate why progress is important in Greenville. You know, again, we have a unique demographic. We have students that come prepared for school, and what we try and do is make sure that we take them from where they're coming in and grow them. This is that progress measure. Sometimes they can meet the achievement measures with little to no influence from us, but progress has to show I'm starting at point A and I'm at point B. And for us to get A's across the board, even with our gifted students who are high achieving, is also a tremendous, tremendous effort.
So that's how the points are calculated. So you take these 4 and add them together and divide by 5 in our case, because we only have 5 of the scored areas, and that's how we end up with a local report card. So any questions we have before we wrap this up under the quality profile or the local report card? There's a lot to celebrate in there. It's also very numbers based. I think you've got to have balance, and that's really hard for me to say sometimes.
So how does it compare to the United States?
You can't compare to the United States because it's their Ohio-based test.
As what?
They're Ohio-based tests.
So they aren't standardized over the whole United States?
There's the same company that gives tests in different locations, but they're not exactly the same test as given in Ohio.
So I think the other thing that I would want to reiterate is the amount of effort that our staff and our students put into this work. Quality profile and local report card. The staff took a leap of faith on project-based learning and really got out of their comfort zone to look at instruction differently. And you're seeing some of the byproducts of that leap of faith. So I want to recognize that that's something that they did differently, that they didn't have to do, but they embraced that process. And then our students embracing that process as well. There really is a teacher benefit and a student benefit to this work. So I just wanted to compliment our staff for the work that they do day in and day out to try and meet the needs of our students in Greenville.
So, okay, so the quality profile is a great tool that lets us see a lot of what's most important to us and what we said are important. Are there more metrics around that we can look at from a long-term perspective to validate that we're meeting the goals of A, PBL, and how the curriculum is evolving, and B, our portrait of a graduate? How do we kind of understand that from governance and kind of see, like,
So that is the great gnarly question that the national network of Ed Leader 21, who does the work of Portrait of a Graduate, is wrestling with. because a lot of that work, sometimes as you measure it, it gives the impression that it's graded, and we don't want it to ever be a graded process. We want to show growth and measure, but not necessarily give the impression that it's evaluative or judging. It's more descriptive feedback in the hands of staff, students, and parents.
Just internally.
Yeah.
I don't think
But we're wrestling
necessarily, so.
It was probably one of the main topics of the conversation that we had with the statewide network on Friday last week with All for Kids. So we're working on that. Their staff is looking at best practices across the country in order to help inform our next steps as we move down that road.
So we're good.
Yeah.
And how about for PBL specifically, since we have great examples and things here, are there ways that project-based learning we should monitor, or what should we look for to kind of ensure that we continue to progress down that path to implement this new kind of curriculum?
I can answer that if you want to.
Well, I was gonna say, the one thing I would wanna see is that you see different examples out there, that you see it growing, if you see projects that are, their scope is different maybe than previous years. You know, some of those projects up there, they were a year-long process that the students went through. Some of them maybe weren't so as involved. That doesn't mean they're not as good if they don't take the full year, but I think in terms of the scope and the ownership that students have and the students bringing the project to us instead of us bringing the project to them, those would be things I would look for as indicators of success when it comes to that.
And I think further examples of how the portrait of a graduate comes to life through PBL projects is also going to be an interesting through line.
Yeah, I mean, PBL is such an evolution. It's not a thing you do once, and you've got your project and you've locked it there. I think it's something that sort of takes over, hopefully, right? The mindset of how we educate kids and so forth, and I'm looking forward to seeing that evolve from the great first initial efforts of just starting a couple of years ago, right? And already some fantastic successes, but there's a way that becomes more integral instead of like project on the side at the end of the year. And I don't know how to quantify that or how to understand like how we progress along that curve. And maybe it's through the portrait that those things become obvious in the metrics we establish there.
I think it will, but I will also say that I have a daughter in the high school, and one of her teachers said at curriculum that, I waited till to the end of the year to do a project-based learning experience, and what I realized is that needs to be what I start with. Because then I can reference it back throughout the entire year or semester. And so just having that awareness, I think is helpful for staff as they plan their curriculum in their year.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. I think that once it gets integrated, it kind of builds like a snowball to some extent. But I want to see those successes. I want to see the failures, right? Because that's a part of it as well.
Yes.
And I want to make sure that we embrace that and celebrate that so much more than the scores that we traditionally have, because that's what's important. So thanks for continuing the work.
Anybody else with questions? Thanks for sharing the good news. That is terrific, and I would second what Superintendent said. It would be somewhat easy to just sit back and look at our empirical results from testing and say, that's great, that's fantastic. It's, the top percentage in the state, it's wonderful, but I applaud the staff, administration, and leadership for continuing, as Thomas indicated, to push forward with PBL and with with portrait of graduate, which I think is really essential to get into the next level, what we want to do here, what we expect to see from young folks who graduate from here and prepare them going forward. I think it's huge, and I know from the experience of my own family that those types of opportunities are really what position young people to continue to succeed in college. So keep doing what you're doing. I thank the staff for everything you do. It's extra work, but it sure pays off.
Well, it's also very reassuring and validating that as we dip more into project-based learning, we we haven't seen a slide in some of the external metrics.
Right.
We've actually seen an increase in performance, which also reinforces that that risk is worth it from a reward standpoint. So and I think it deepens the learning for both students and staff.
It's good stuff.
Yeah.
We are now at the point in our agenda where we welcome public comment. If there's anyone who would like to offer any comments, please step forward to the podium, state your name and address, and share your views with us.
Is Ohio required if you're passing a civics test?
Passing the civics test, there is no,
Yeah, you have to pass government.
you have to pass government, but there's not a specific
I just
competency
found
test.
out that and late in the afternoon that there is actually an app that teaches interactive constitution. And West Virginia requires it as Ohio.
We're the wrong body.
Being from West Virginia, I can't touch that.
I
I
would
can't
s-
believe, I mean, they were asking the question, how many parts of government are there? Yes, executive legislature. And the percentage of kids who graduate from high school is
I think that's a problem nationwide. I think the
You think
studies-
what?
I think that's a problem nationwide. I think the studies indicate that. I would say that our high school government classes are as good as it gets from what I've seen in a number of different locations. The folks who teach, the curriculum, the depth that our students go to in pursuing their projects is top notch. But I would say if you want to encourage the legislature to add yet another test to graduation, take it up with the legislature. Any other public comments? Board discussion. So we don't have anything specifically on the board discussion list tonight. If there are things that we've talked about this evening or things that we've heard about, folks want to comment or discuss?
I would like to bring up the mental health
Yes.
topic because it has been kind of a conversation that we started 2 years ago with the Wellbeing Task Force. We've had multiple board actions related to addressing that need. But I want you to know that there is not a requirement to spend the dollars in year one. Okay, so it is not a race to spend these dollars. They will carry over. They'll carry over not only after the first year, but also after the second year. That's been confirmed by ODE. Whether we will have the funds down the road, we cannot confirm that. But what I will tell you is we're taking a very deliberative approach to find the right partner to sustain that, whatever decision we make, as far as an additional resource for our students. We're looking at that in a way that we can sustain it. So when you partner with an outside agency, there is an ability to front load some of the money, so to speak, to get a staff member on board, and then after that staff member is on board and working with the clientele, they have the ability to offset the district spend by private insurance or other mechanisms of private pay. So obviously with a sliding scale from anybody who has an inability to pay. But a lot of those mechanisms are ways that we can potentially sustain a person supporting our students without necessarily investing in the long term of an FTE. So I just want you to be aware that we're pursuing that. There are also things that you can do from a capital expenditure of those dollars as well. It really is both. So it's quite open-ended. We're doing our due diligence. We're working slowly but intentionally through that process. We are going to actually put together a plan that is a requirement. There is no template for the plan. We're going to put together a plan for those dollars, probably related to how we have to report out how we spent them. So that's going to be released in late October by ODE. So once we have that, we're going to use it as a barometer for how we're going to spend the money and then sustain it long term. So
Go ahead.
Well, I think it's been clear through conversations at the board level, at the teacher level, at the administrative level, that an investment in a person that could provide gap services between what the school can provide and what true mental health facilities can provide is a necessary bridge, and that's what we're trying to pursue.
That's sort of come up out of the discussion on the well-being initiative.
Yeah.
Committee's work as well. Yeah. Sort of from my perspective, that's the single most important area where I think we can be impactful with those dollars. Impactful in a lot of different ways. So, are there things that you need us to do or want us to do to help define how we would measure that impact going forward? Or what do you suggest is the pathway to putting that package together?
So I think there's a through line of what is our end goal? I don't necessarily just want a Band-Aid for the bridge. I want to be able to point back to some of our pillars around building capacity of staff. And we've done a little bit through mental health training, first aid training for bus drivers, food service, our front office staff and beyond. But I want there to be a component of professional learning that is embedded in the dollars that we spend, not just a person. Because what I think we've learned from the literature is that it has to be everybody paying attention to every interaction with the intentional view of trying to recognize signs of a student that's in distress. So I think having a critical component for PD is going to be very important. But what we're going to try and do is connect it back to the OES survey and make sure that we're targeting the right things long term. And so what I would encourage you to do is think about those connections, and then when I bring the proposal to the board for approval, you challenge us on those things.
You won't be surprised with this, but to me, this is a seminal opportunity to do something hugely impactful for a long period of time. And wellness funds, the state has offered, are important, obviously, and can help us get started there. But I would encourage you not to limit your thinking to what those funds are. And one thing we know about state funds is they won't be there forever.
Correct.
I suspect that this board and future boards will find ways to prioritize that, as we have for the last couple of years when we've talked really continuously for the last several years about addressing well-being and mental health issues, stress management amongst our students and everyone in the district. So my message to you is go big on this. Don't restrain.
I like it.
No, I think these are the things we've been talking about for a long time,
Yeah.
things we've been planning on, right? So the fact that we take money.
Yeah, if you remember, well, 2 years ago, one of the recommendations was an additional staff member, but I think there were multiple things that we put in place that were lower cost, called classroom, too good for drugs, the prevention policy, all those things were lower, no cost. This is an opportunity for us to go big, but also think broad.
We've been building towards this.
Correct.
We have important pieces that are in place. This is the next step. I'm excited to see that.
And I'm glad to hear you use the word gap, because a number of organizations and boards I serve on, that's probably the biggest challenge is they fall between the gap. They might get some initial help, education, but before they go to another level, there's nothing.
And we see that every single day.
And if we can bridge that, that'll be huge. That'll be huge.
Anybody else on board discussion? Okay.
that item. That is going to be revisited, potentially with an additional proposal that will be in coordination with that contract. So I'm going to table that or request it to be revisited later.
It's fine.
Okay. Action item 10.02 is our community foundation appointment of Scott Mortimer.
So moved.
Second.
That's right.
So Scott was very supportive of our levy campaign, served in a variety of capacities with his wife. His wife joined the Granville Education Foundation, and Scott has agreed to serve as our representative, ex officio representative on the Community Foundation. Remember, Olivia Aguilar was fulfilling that role, and she is moving because she took another position at another university. So she, even though it's viewed as temporary for her for a little bit, she's not going to be able to fulfill that role.
Discussion. We appreciate his willingness to serve. Call the roll, please.
Ms. Dietz.
Aye.
Mr. Wolf.
Aye.
Dr. Cronin. Aye. Mr. Miller.
Aye.
Mr. Jennings.
Aye.
Action item 10.03 is the approval of the Business and Community Advisory Committee plan.
So moved.
Second.
So this, we are required to annually approve our Business Community Advisory Committee plan. We partner with Licking County ESC, who convenes that committee on our behalf. So we have to submit our written plan, and that's why it's an action item tonight.
Tom, does that cover? I don't quite recall. Let's go.
So the plan is, it has a little bit of an advisory component from the standpoint of programming. So like CTEC offers welding. Well, there's an advisory group for welding that says, if you're going to have a welding program, this is what you should include in that program in order to stay up to date with that industry. That's exactly what they do on a macro scale, is they talk with business and community partners to say that this is where certain fields are heading. Please stay up to date with your work in the schools.
So we receive a plan back from this committee that we take into account as we
No,
read
this
it?
plan is our agreement to participate in that that advisory committee. So we're required to submit a plan, so the ESC creates the plan, we adopt it as our plan, and we submit it to the state to fulfill the legal requirement. Clear as mud.
Is it useful?
Is the plan useful?
Do
Or is the
we-
committee?
Yes, right. I can get the feedback from that and make changes.
Right.
No, but, yeah.
It's more useful than
I don't mind.
doing it ourselves.
Yeah.
Is the plan useful? Absolutely not.
Okay.
Is the interaction with our business community important? Absolutely. So there are partnerships that are
Right.
established. You know, when we're sitting across from Boeing or Owens Corning or, you know, Holiday, all of those partnerships, I think, provide valuable insight.
And they get back here effectively through this plan?
Yeah.
Ms. Dietz.
Aye.
Mr. Miller.
Aye.
Dr. Corman. Aye. Mr. Wolf.
Aye.
Mr. Jennings.
Aye. Thank you.
10.04 is the approval of the ELL handbook for 2019-2020.
So moved.
Second.
There are very few changes to this document. This is just the regular updating that we go through and just alignment to ODE's new names and policies related to ELL.
Mr. Miller.
Aye.
Dr. Corman. Aye. Ms. Dietz.
Aye.
Mr. Wolf.
Aye.
Mr. Jennings.
Aye.
Next, the consent agenda, A through D.
So moved. Second.
All right, I would like to call your attention to the acceptance of donations and grants.
$200 in GDF for the Science Olympiad. Is that one of their smaller interim grants?
I believe it is.
That's a good channel, and it's nice to see them stepping up and people asking for it and so forth.
Yeah.
They've got a lot that they can help out with, so that works.
It's a nice donation from our friends at the Kiwanis.
So it's just gonna be an update.
Well, and what I also want to reference is, a lot of the things that we get in the acceptance of donations and grants are student-led. So it's not us necessarily asking Kiwanis for additional revenue. Our students are presenting to them and pitching a project, which, I think there are multiple funding mechanisms. Local businesses are some, or, community partners are some, but we also have budget dollars and GDF available. So as students go down the road of projects, really eliminating all of the potential funding opportunities. But I think, the Kiwanians have always been extremely supportive of our students.
And as much kind of are open to making that connection with students, right? The more that students get to pitch their idea and things like that, the more people in the community see what's happening, right? And all these different organizations that support us in various ways. I think that connection between the students and the community is as important as the financial contribution is made to some extent, because it will lead to even more.
They do a very nice job, because a lot of times, for example, those donations came from one of our committees. They'll come and meet with our committee. And the interaction is always great.
And I think if you've never seen the K-Kids involvement with the Kiwanians, I mean, Don Owen, and it's Don, right? Lewis, thank you. I knew it. They do a fantastic job. It takes a special person to interact with the second grader on a regular basis. Yes, exactly, and they do a fantastic job. So, very supportive of the schools.
Great. Okay.
We also have some supplemental contracts, some of the standard hiring items. And then I will call your attention to the 8th grade Washington DC field trip. And then also our basketball team is heading up to Cleveland for a game up in November.
I don't know if it makes a difference, I didn't notice it before, but unless there's a way back machine for the second.
Oh,
The
yeah.
return date is equal.
Yes, it is. So May 12th, 2019. Thank you. We will adjust the minutes in court. Any questions? Oh yeah, it's the second one.
It's great to see some of our former staff members like Mrs. Van and Mrs. Thompson are back and continue to be a part of the district. So thanks for those relationships. Oh, yeah. There's a number of you that are former in this group.
Well,
Yeah.
Dr. Corman? Aye. Ms. Deeds?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Janice?
Aye. Thank you.
thank you.
All right.
Finances.
Item 12.01, approval of the August 2019 financial report.
So moved.
Second. What are you gonna do with that $58?
What's that? Oh, yeah.
Spend it very wisely.
Any other questions?
That was my comments. How we spend it? No, thank you, and the report was good. Comprehensive results.
Thank you. Ms. Deeds?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Dr. Corman? Aye. Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Mr. Janice?
Aye.
Item 12.02, approval of the then and now resolution requesting $40,540.25 to LACA for the FY20 annual service agreement, $3,218.68 to Rush Truck Centers of Ohio for vehicle parts, and $3,736.67 for Versatrans e-link software and support.
Second.
We'll be giving that to you anyway. Amy?
Last month, we had some of these come up as well, so just a reminder, if we receive an invoice that is dated prior to a purchase order due to timing, and the amount exceeds $3,000, we have to bring it to you for approval. So this may be a bit of a standing item on our agenda until we get in the swing of things and to have a process, making sure that who's putting in purchase orders and making sure that they're done, preferably in July for things that are routine, so we'll working through some of those things.
It's mostly a year-end, fiscal year-end.
Yes.
It's also something that's coming up, we use a system, it's called Bonefish, and all of our AP check runs and payroll goes through it. And I then do a review process and go through and it flags certain payments that are high risk, or it'll catch those then and now situations for us too. So being thorough and going through all of those payments has actually helped us find some of these to make sure that they're board approved before, in case, rather than being caught in an audit after the fact. So it's a good preventative tool that really is paying off.
I like that. Extra review, that's good.
That's great.
Questions?
Dr. Corman?
Aye.
Ms. Dietz?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Janice?
Aye.
Item 12.03, approval of the permanent appropriation resolution for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2020.
So moved.
Second.
You have approved two versions of temporary appropriations, but now we have to approve the permanent appropriations, which are really just the same as temporary appropriations. But I have made a few adjustments. Two things to note are the increases in the general fund and permanent improvement for the fund transfers that will be up for approval on the next two items. As well as I made some adjustments to the grant accounts based on calculation of what carryover I think that we'll have now that we're almost through the end of that grant period. So I've made those changes, and this just has to be approved and sent to the county auditor before October 1st.
Questions?
Ms. Dietz?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Dr. Corman?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Denise?
Aye.
Item 12.04 is the resolution for fund transfer from the operating fund to the building fund for $1,128,000 for the safety and accessibility aspect of the athletic complex.
So moved.
This is the first of two resolutions before you tonight that will satisfy the district's $1.5 million commitment to the safety and accessibility components of the athletic project. So this is the first part, which is coming from our general fund. And so the way that we've kind of structured it and fit it into the budget over the long term is we have the cash to pay for it now out of the general fund, so that's where we're going to do this transfer. And then we have TIF payments that come in on an annual basis, and what we've been doing is only recording 100,000 of those payments every year to the general fund, and then the remaining amount, which is about 80,000, into permanent improvement. So instead of doing that, we're just going to record the whole amount into the general fund. So that's an additional $80,000. So that over the course of 10 to 12 years pays this back, and is essentially us loaning ourselves the cash from one fund to the other. Any questions about that?
The work is expected to start conclusion of the football season. Both
On
funds.
target date and fingers crossed for August of 2020.
So that will include the stands and include the restrooms.
Yeah, so when we talk about safety and accessibility, we are referring to the track, the bleachers, the restrooms, obviously utilities associated with all of those. So the bleachers really are the ADA issue that I'm will share that there isn't much contingency available in these first two items. As we get firm pricing over the next 2 months, I may be back to talk to you a little bit more about that, because there's always contingencies when you're doing some type of renovation project. So just want to make you aware of that.
Are we, I know we're working with Robertson as our contract manager. Have we had conversations with them about specifically on the bathrooms, asking for a variance in the code so that we
So
don't have?
right now, we're working with MSA. All of this is pre-construction dialogue. We intend to contract with MSA and potentially Robertson Construction moving forward. All MSA has had preliminary discussions with Licking County Planning, who governs this, and there's been some willingness to give a variance for toilets at the baseball facility and our current concession area, and the bathrooms that are connected to the high school, because you have to be within 500 feet of those restrooms. So our fans on the visiting side will have access to those restrooms as well. So we're trying to get the fewest number of toilets, but it's still probably more than what I would view as reasonable, because we have to comply with codes that aren't necessarily designed for high schools. They're designed for the NFL or Major League Baseball.
Either way, we'll end up with a lot more capital, right?
Correct. Yes. But we are having those preliminary conversations and working to try and shrink that number to a rational and reasonable.
That's exactly right.
And excuse me, that's within Licking County, right?
That's correct.
Right.
Last I heard, we don't have any professional teams.
That's correct.
It's just such a huge cost driver.
It is.
Right, for non-value to
But have we, I don't know, and perhaps Lakewood, maybe Lincoln now, folks that sort of
Johnstown.
upgrade their facilities, they're able to.
They were, but Johnstown's proximity to their high school is much closer. I'm fortunate for them, but they still added quite a few toilets.
It's a big number cost-wise.
It's a huge driver. And most people think, oh, well, a $3,000 toilet isn't that bad. But when you have that number, you have to have a bigger sewer line, you have to have a bigger water supply line. There are a lot of other ancillary costs that go along with having that number of toilets. So costs escalate quickly.
have, how many now?
I'm not gonna say a number.
Because we don't know yet.
We don't know. We're still having those conversations.
I say it's an interesting thing to try and push that, or understand at least how we do the right thing for our community.
Are we upgrading updating the accessibility of the press box as well, that part of
Yes.
the features?
Yes.
What does that mean? What does that entail?
Well, when you say accessibility, we will not be,
Putting in an elevator?
putting in an elevator, correct? Yeah, I mean, it's updating the press box in aggregate, but it's not necessarily making it totally handicap accessible. But what we are doing is making the bleachers handicap accessible, so that they don't need to go up that high. They can go on that first level and have seating that's prime seating for great viewing pleasure. So it will be the first row in the center. I'm very excited for that, actually, because I believe there are several people that don't come because of that inability to get a good line of sight.
Questions? I didn't mean to hijack your, the funding.
It's okay.
We talked about toilets. Why don't you join the board?
Yeah.
Take the roll.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Dr. Foreman?
Aye.
Ms. Deeds?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Denise?
Aye. Thank you.
All right, item 12.05 is approval of the resolution for a fund transfer from our permanent improvement fund to the building fund for $372,000 for the safety and accessibility aspects of the above comments.
Second.
Same conversation.
This actually,
Apparently not.
had a lot of toilet conversations.
Yeah, we have. It's a dirty business.
So the $372,000 corresponds to the capital budget in the financial report. It's the track and bleacher components in the remaining balance amounts. So we had $225,000 set aside for the track. Regardless of the athletic complex as a whole, we planned on taking care of the track this year. And we had a $150,000 set aside for the bleachers. And we're only going to need to spend at most $3,000 of that this year, getting them in shape for the current year. So we're going to transfer the remaining balance there to the project fund so that we're paying everything out of one account, because what's going to be very important through this project is clearly and transparent about our accounting because of the public-private partnership, and just wanting to be very clear on how all of that is working. So we wanted to have these funds designated all in one place to pay.
Have we already spent the money on the bleachers?
The 3,000, do you know?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Did we spend 3,000? I know that's what we did the purchase order for. I don't know if that's what
It would be very close to.
Okay.
So we're done. There's no more repairs on those bleachers.
Well, it's
Hopefully.
something, I mean, we look
As
at
of
it every.
today,
We
Fingers
look at
crossed.
it before each event to make sure that nothing's compromised. So if we have to do a last minute repair, we
Right.
do.
Okay.
Ms. Deeds?
aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Dr. Corman? Mr. Miller? Mr. Janus?
The bleachers are safe.
Item 12.06, approval of the contract agreement with Medical Mutual of Ohio for medical insurance effective January 1st, 2020 through December 31st, 2020.
Second.
As you know, we went through a request for proposal process this year for insurance providers, and we decided to stick with Medical Mutual. They were came in at 8.9% increase in premiums. So that combined with not having to incur the administrative expense of changing providers at this point, the administrative team felt that this was the best recommendation from those responses.
I commend you for pushing them hard to sharpen the pencils and lower the
Which is great.
Thank you for that. That's a big win.
Continuity providers is always good too.
Yes. Dr. Corman? Aye. Ms. Dietz?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Janus?
Aye.
Item 12.07, approval of the contract agreement with Guardian for employee-funded voluntary accident and critical illness insurance, effective January 1st, 2020 through December 31st, 2022.
Second.
So this year, we also did a review of our voluntary products to make sure that we're offering employees the best for their money. So these two plans, accident is replacing an existing plan with, Tanya, do you know who our accident insurance is currently with? Is that Trustmark? Trustmark. And critical illness will be an additional offering. That's kind of the way that insurance is going, because it also includes cancer. So we have a cancer plan, we're going to keep that, and then offer additionally this critical illness plan, which covers additional conditions beyond just cancer. So these were, the accident is giving us better rates for comparable or better coverage.
And these are paid for by?
100% paid for by by the employee and completely voluntary. Dr. Corman? Aye. Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Ms. Dietz?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Mr. Janice?
Aye.
Thank you. Item 12.08, approval of the contract agreement with Cyber Scout for employee-funded voluntary identity theft insurance effective January 1st, 2020 through December 31st, 2022.
So moved.
Second.
This is replacing a LifeLock plan. This is something that has changed dramatically with all of the risk that's out there now in the cybersecurity world. So this actually is going to save employees quite significantly on the premiums that they'll pay, and covers quite a bit more in terms of recouping what's been lost if they are faced with identity theft.
How would these two kind of voluntary plans compare to the pricing that you might get on the open market? Is there a significant benefit to this being offered in the district, or is it the facilitation of the product that's the most important factor?
Some of these, identity theft is after tax, I believe, but I'd have to check on the others to see if they're pre-tax. So pre-tax plans, obviously that's the benefit. The Cyber Scout identity theft, I think that's more just a convenience factor for employees, because they actually still have to go out and create their account and add all this information, so it's really just a payment component run through payroll deduction. That's a convenience factor. Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Dr. Corman? Aye. Ms. Dietz? Aye. Mr. Janice?
Aye.
Entertain a motion to enter into executive session.
Second.
Consider the employment of a public employee official.
Ms. Dietz?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Dr. Corman? Aye. Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Mr. Janice?
Aye. We won't take any further action on this tonight. No second half.